this is about the Amplio Foundations, and something very interesting happened in this. Originally, my plan was to talk more about this stuff, which you've probably seen before, where I've talked about first principles, guidance, and factors for effective value streams. I've actually updated this a little bit as I'm building the thing. And in fact, I created
Al, do you think you're sharing your screen?
I did think I was sharing my screen, so thank you so much. Um, there we go. Okay, so uh, here is, you've seen probably this sheet before. I've actually redid it a little bit to make it more in the order of things, added some guidance and factors for effective value stream. And then we've even added some things on the Lucid Spark board that explains this, where I'm building out the Amplio Foundations, where I go from first principles to guidance to factors for effective value streams, so you can see the relationship. These in red are the critical ones about delay and capacity. And these are what happens if you don't, I've seen this whole idea of dysfunctional mapping, and I realized, well, this is just really anti-pattern. So I had this. And originally, I'll admit, I was thinking of trying to cover this, and I realized, no, this is the second level. The first level is a lot simpler. So this talk is going to be about the first level. Uh, and by the first level, it's really what is important to attend to. And then the first principles support that first level. The guidance tells you how to kind of get into the first principles, and the factors for effective value streams are those things that actually can tell you whether something will be an improvement or not. And so this is going to be a really high overview of what's the essence of it. For those of you who don't know me, I've been around a long time. I was doing Agile before we had a name for it, and a lot of us were trying to figure it out. I was invited to the 10th anniversary of the Snowbird, where Agile Manifesto had been done in 2001. I was not there, but 10 years later, I was invited back for those people and some new people, because David Anderson and I had created Lean Kanban University, which I'm no longer affiliated with. In fact, it's no longer called Lean Kanban University, because I brought the Lean in and he brought the Kanban. And when I left, he changed the name. I know SAFe well. I've been actually at the forefront of most of the things out there. I've been around quite a bit. Now, what we're going to talk about today, I want to be clear. I call it Amplio Foundations just to give it a name, but it's not really mine. It's really like what I tend to call the physics of flow. I think I got that from Peter Merrill, or I can't remember, it was Wolfram Mueller. I like both of their work. And it really is a collection of work from Akoff, Christopher Alexander, Akoff with systems, Alexander is how do you structure them, Deming's about how systems impact behavior, Reinertson's science and engineering, Goldrat's understanding of systems, and Gilb's purpose. So I'm not going to go in through those six, but I wanted to be clear that this is my distillation of their perspectives. I don't consider this my own. There is some new stuff in here, I suppose, but it's more how I've integrated it than like I've really, like it's mine. Or, I just put Amplio on it because it's part of the Amplio system. Amplio is based on it. So it's not like I have Amplio and then here's something about Amplio. It's really, this is the foundation, a scientific engineering approach that Amplio is based on. What we're going to do today, and we're going to do this, I think, reasonably quickly because I've distilled it pretty well, is I'm going to talk about what's our goal and the impediment to it. What's our focus on value? Then what do we need to overcome these quick feedback, not go faster, remove delays, have small completions, avoid multitasking, a focus on finishing, how to use pull to avoid overloading capacity. And I'm going to end with where our capacity goes. So we have a goal target 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 things, though, that I say is really all you need for the foundation. In fact, what's been very interesting about doing this 30 slides or so that I'm going to cover in about a half an hour actually create the basis for a team to do something where the practices will just fit in. I'm not going to do that today, of course, but it was occurring to me that it'd be very easy to come up and just add some practices to this. And then where our capacity goes is just a summary. So we have 7 things in the middle and 1 at the front and end. It's really not that many things to be aware of. And these are all self-evident because we all have experience in things. This is one reason I hate the follow until you understand. That's more an indicator of the people who are explaining things to you that they don't know how to give you an underlying model that would enable you to understand right at the beginning. I think understanding at the beginning is important. Not too much theory, but understanding why what happens happens. And then there is a summary. Okay, so our goal is simple. Flow of the greatest value quickly with less effort. Okay. Uh, this actually, if you believe the lean mantra, which I do, lowers costs. This and raises quality. That's the thing that's misunderstood about lean a lot. You're not trying to do less. You're not trying to cut costs. It's a byproduct of learning and doing things better. The focus is on value and learning, and that's really what we're up to. Value and learning is also why the iron triangle is so senseless. They always talk about the iron triangle as fixed scope, time, and cost, and the quality goes down. Well, actually, if you attend to quality and speed of delivery by removing delays, you can affect much more scope, much more value in less cost. Okay, so here's our problem. That's our goal. What's our problem? Most companies are ordered hierarchically, and the problem with this is we're organized, but everybody works in silos, and we're focusing on our silos, but our work cuts across the silo. Nobody's paying attention to that. This causes all sorts of problems. It also explains why team ups don't work. And even team ups and bottom down don't work so well because you're still in the silo idea. You have to take a value stream view. Now, the thing is, most people in organizations, there is nobody focusing on value. There are people focusing on their silos, and then they have meetings to coordinate their silos instead of saying, no, we should be moving across. So that's kind of what our problem is. And if you shift the idea from people to the work, you'll notice that the work is waiting most of the time. You know, he comes in, he gets approval or not. And it cuts across the organization where most of the time the work is not doing anything. Why? Because you're working on something else. So when we look at the problem we have, and by the way, this is be a little sarcastic here, sorry, a very innovative idea. Look at your problem first before you come up with predetermined solutions. See, this whole thing I'm talking about is how do we avoid this problem that's here? How do we get value out the door quickly? That's what we want to look at. You know, and you can ask what percent of the time is work moving forward for one particular value. My experience is most of the time it's not moving forward. It's like 10, 15, 20%. And even when teams are doing agile, it's still not moving forward because you got a lot of wasted waiting here. You got a lot of wasted waiting here. Okay. You wait for other people to be done. By the way, if you're working on two things, by definition, you can't be doing more than 50% work on it. And there's overhead, so it's less. Working on 3 or 4 things, which a lot of people are, you're probably something's waiting 80% of the time. And the real question is, how would you know? No one's managing this across. Now, this is starting to become in vogue. Mick Kirsten's work, Project to Product, has a great book and talks about value stream. Uh, we're coming out, me and 3 other people are co-writing a book on Lean Agile in the digital world, and we talk a lot more about value streams. Of course, I, in my own work, talk a lot about value streams. So the thing to recognize is that when you're stuck in these situations, people don't work as well because the environment has a big impact. So the environment's a key thing as well. Okay, a cursory analysis of most value streams would reveal that the work spends most of its time waiting. Not people are busy, of course they're busy, but most of the time work is waiting. And this is just an example used once. It's just that the time to do the work is quick, but the time between the work. Don Reinertson, this book is still ahead of its time. There's no other comparable book. It gives some confidence that there are these principles I'll be talking about. He talks about 175 of them. Every one of them is useful, but that's a lot to read to get started. So I'm going to try to distill this down. But the idea is we don't want to get a better return by trying to go faster. Going faster at these steps won't help too much because it's these delays that are causing us the problem. So we want to eliminate delays between what we do. Again, this is kind of the problem. Okay, so now let's get into the solution of things. We need to focus on value. Tom Guild talks about who are our critical stakeholders. You know, what's their success criteria? You know, it's got to be something you understand. What are their constraints? Now, the constraints may be internal or external. If you got regulators, you got to pay attention to those. Those are stakeholders as well. That's why I didn't say customers. Who are the executive sponsors of this? Who are the customers? Who are the regulators that we have to live with? These are very critical things that we have to tend to. If you're starting at the team, this is usually difficult to do because this has to involve more than one of the regulators. Just a product owner is not going to have enough exposure. So this is one thing. One of the principles is we need to focus on value and we need to go back to who's driving us. Okay. Second thing, quick feedback is needed. It enables course correction. Without it, we'll be working on the wrong things. Feedback is critical. If there were 3 words in the Agile space, it's feedback, avoid delays, and pull. And we'll see that. I'll be covering all these. Feedback is really critical. Feedback is how you fix getting surprised. When you don't course correct, if you start from here to there, by the time you get there, the target's moved. This is called, in the Agile Manifesto, they talk about this, welcome changing requirements. Well, you're not going to welcome them when you've gotten here and now you discover it's there. The idea is to notice that it's worse than you're off target. Now to get to target, you've got to spend more time on things. So this idea of course correction is basically the essence of incremental building. We might start, maybe here I've got it showing halfway, at least the course correction is not as bad. What if we course corrected every step of the way? We'd almost always be on target. This idea that you have to fail with the customer is absolutely wrong, in my opinion. You cannot see the end goal, that's true, but it's like driving your car in fog. You can't see 100 feet ahead, but if you go steadily within the vision of what you can see further after it. So as you move a little bit, you get clarity on this is moving. You develop so you can do little pieces and course correct. It gets harder as you get bigger, there's no question. But the idea of incremental building is to help you discover where to go and to lower the amount of waste required. Now, if you're building a new product, there might be some uncertainty about what that's supposed to be. But then again, you course correct. What I love about Eric Ries's of the startup way is the startup way is really about validating your assumptions, not about how do you build it incrementally. Now, he does talk a lot about how you build things incrementally with minimum viable products and all that, but it's really about how do you challenge assumptions? How do you learn quickly? You might discover that you're building something that's not of value. This is what it means fail fast, although I hate that term. I'd rather learn fast. Learn fast, we don't have a good product, okay? I don't consider that a failure. Okay, I already mentioned we don't want to go faster. We want to remove delays. See, this is how we normally are. Let's get something on there. See, the problem here is the really important items are being slowed down by the less important items. Except, of course, every stakeholder believes, well, the most important car on this freeway is my car. So there has to be this sense of value. You know, we want to go from utilization to value delivery. If you don't have those stakeholders, see, this is the tie-in. If you don't have that agreement on who the stakeholders are, then notice you can't have agreement on what is important. Having these individual teams work and then try to collaborate is a fool's errand in the sense that you've already started, they're already committed to their work, they're already being evaluated on it instead of starting up at the front with what's important. So notice I'm starting to blend a little bit of the principle. The principle is you better know who your stakeholders are, what their success criteria, and what constraints you have for it. But then this gives you the insight that that's where I start. I understand the overall picture because otherwise I'm going to have everybody thinking their thing is the best, the most important. And I can only get this when I have an overarching view of things. Work on small items. This is a key concept, but it's ironic. It's a key concept, and there is no name for it in any of the popular certifying. Now, I do throw popular in. So if you take out DA and you take out, I don't know if Steve Tendon does certification I suspect Xscale and Blue Dolphin have this concept. But what's the name for the smallest thing you could build and release? It's not a story. Stories aren't often releasable. It's not even a feature. You might need multiple features. Certainly not an epic in SAFE's terms, because that's big and you pull things out of it. This is actually kind of amazing when you think about it. One of the most important concepts doesn't have a name in the Agile space in general, which is what's the smallest thing that you can deliver that has value in and of itself. And it's important because Goldratt talks about reducing batch size is sometimes all it takes to bring a system back into control. And yet we have to fabricate this. See, I'll just talk about a sprint goal. Sprint goal, that's an increment, is not necessarily the smallest thing you could release that has value. In fact, it rarely is. I mean, what's the chances that the smallest thing you could release is exactly 2 weeks if you're doing sprints of 2 weeks? So they say, oh yeah, well, you can build increments up to that point. Yeah, but an increment is just a piece of value. It's not stated this way. It's very important. We get a vicious cycle because too much work is in process. This is what Goldratt's talking about. Smaller will take us from here to there. So smaller is another principle. So we use the term minimum valuable increment. I used to call these minimum business increments until Tom Gill mentioned that, by the way, when you do that, you cut out government agencies because they're not businesses. And see, this is an interesting point, and it brings up this point I was talking about here. We create our understanding from our speaking, from our languaging, as Dr. Flores used to call it, how we speak. We create our reality. So if we don't say something, like Edgar Schein talks about, we don't talk and think about what we see. We see what we are able to think and talk about. If we're not talking about this notion of an MVI, we have to construct it in our heads. Two things will happen. First of all, it won't always be constructed, and then we'll have disagreements on what it means. Some terms in the Agile space, like what an MVP is, have been bastardized so much, they're virtually meaningless. Minimum marketable feature, SAFE is destroyed by redefining it. So minimum valuable increment, though, seems to have this common definition. It's the smallest increment of value that we can deliver to the customer that is complete and having value by itself. Now, sometimes you'll want to batch these, and I'm not going to go in there, but we call that a minimum valuable release. So you can have minimum viable products to try to see if something's of value. I'm interested in this valuable increment for a couple of reasons I'll show. And then there's the bigger thing. But to go back, the principle is to work on small items. This is a way to do that. So here I'm into a practice, but it fits the minimum, this small thing. It's right size. Features might be an MVI, but a feature may not be an MVI. Putting a feature on a CD player to go fast forward is not very useful if you don't have a feature that would take you in reverse, as an example. Okay. Epics using SAFE's definition are usually too big. Even in the normal Agile space, if it's just a super large feature, you probably don't need all that story, rather, super large story. The purpose of an MVI is not doing less. It's about delivering value sooner. By the way, this is important because if you start talking to executives about, oh, we're going to give you the smallest thing that will deliver value, the chances are they're going to say, I want all of it. Because see, this is what we call a filter. They've heard people tell them they can't get everything. So when you tell them you're going to give them something sooner, they will hear I'm getting less. No, you're getting something sooner. Let me ask you, when you were a kid and say you got $5 allowance a week, did you want $5 on Saturday, or would a buck every day, during the week be better? It's like, get value sooner. I'm still going to get the $5, but I'm going to give you $1 a day. It's kind of the idea. The heritage is software by numbers, minimum marketable feature. I just want to acknowledge that. When they came out, we read it. It was brilliant. The MMF and SAFE, even though they acknowledge this, they have nothing to do with each other. They pulled a term out of a book, said that's what they're doing, and then what they use it as is totally no correspondence to what they talk about. It's really kind of irritating, but they've done that before. Actually, that's a common thing for frameworks to do. So I'm acknowledging them, but I'm not acknowledging them so you can learn more about it from SAFE. I've got things on the website. What we did is we call it an MVI because we used to call them MMFs, and then companies will tell us, well, we're not marketing, so we need to We don't want to call it that. So that's when we came up with a minimum business increment, and now it's moved to minimum valuable increment to include government agencies. Okay. We need to avoid multitasking. But multitasking is actually not the real problem. We'll see this at the very end when I summarize. It's really a symptom of too many things in play, not delivering value quickly, getting slow feedback, and creating waste. And lowering your efficiency, of course. We all know that. Okay. The way you get out of multitasking is you create a focus on finishing. Unfinished work is the bane of development. Delays delivery of value because it's not done. Causes multitasking, which we all hate. Injects delays to feedback, which causes waste because we can't course correct. Our target's done. So here's the question to ask. Is there something I can finish or help finish before starting something new? It's really simple. You've just finished something. Most of the time, people will just start something new. No, no, no. Can I finish something else? Can I help somebody finish something? See, what's important here, each of the practices that are being derived, each of the practices that are being derived from the principles are actually really simple. I'm going to pause for a second. Does that ring true? I mean, if it doesn't, that's fine. We're going to have about half an hour after the presentation, but I want a little bit of a feedback that each one of the things I'm saying, here's a principle and here's something you can do. Now, there's obviously a lot more to some of these things, but my contention, and maybe we'll just talk when I'm done so I can get this, but my contention is a lot of the stuff to actually get to the creative focus on finishing. This isn't hard. You just look at it. It's just oh, I've just finished this story. Huh. I wonder if I should pick up another story. Oh, maybe I'll help that person finish their story. I'll help that person finish their feature. I have less in play. I multitask less. We get stuff done. If I start a new feature, if I finish the feature, start it. I mean, if I have to start something new, then start it in an opened MVI. Let me say that again. I don't know what's with me. Defective coffee again. They have a lot of that in Seattle. Is there something I can finish? Okay, so if I can, I do that. If I can't, then I have to start a new feature. Start it in an opened MVI. Don't open up a new MVI. If I start a new story, start it in an open feature. Don't open up a new feature. Can I help someone else finish? This will lower the number of items in play. That's what I mean. It'll get me quicker value for less effort because it goes out the door and I don't create the waste. It's just a very simple concept. Why this is taught late in the game after people have used it, a new process for a few weeks, is just totally beyond me because you can understand this right from the beginning. There's another insight here. I'm not going to go into much, but starting early when you don't have capacity means everything else finishes later, doesn't get you ahead of the game, creates waste, unplanned effort. People want to do this because of improper budgeting and allocation methods. So yes, there is more than just following these principles and simple practices. But let me tell you, you can figure out how to do budgeting and allocation a lot easier when you're dealing with smaller things where people have agreed to what's important. Okay. And this helps avoid the waste that's otherwise created. You got to fix it at the source of the problem. You have to attend to everything. There's a concept called full kitting that comes out of theory of constraint that says don't start unless you can finish. Like you wouldn't start a painting job unless you had the paint, the drop cloths, the ladders. Don't start building something unless you have in place a plan for how to market it, how to sell it, how to support it. Otherwise, it's going to get done. It's going to get on your release machines and nothing else will happen until that's done. So you've injected delays without this. I'm not going to go into how to do that, but that's also straightforward. Okay, now this is an interesting one. Using pull. Pull means teams pull when they have the capacity, not push. This is the big, big, big thing about Agile. This is the biggest concept. See, in a waterfall, you plan what you can do, you work ahead, you tell the team's going to do this. In Agile, every form of Agile, so even SAFe, they pull big 3-month batches, but there's still a pull system. The teams get to decide how much they're going to build, at least theoretically. And they pull based on what they think their capacity is. Now, there are 3 major approaches. Big room planning from SAFe pulls 3 months. That's a lot. Scrum pulls smaller amounts, 1 to 4 weeks typically. That's still estimating how much you can get done. And then there's the flow model where you just pull as the job comes along. Oh yeah, I can do that. I'll do that, finish it and do it. When you pull, if you only pull work for the capacity you have for it, you'll never be overloaded. Now, if you're batching like Safe or you're batching like Scrum, you might misjudge what you did, and then you're actually pulling more than you thought you could do. I mean, you're pulling more and it turns out to be more. This is one of the reasons you should look at flow sometimes, and why Safe 3 months might be a good start, actually. People give Safe a lot of grief. 3 months, if you're a company that has never done anything in less than a year, let me tell you, 3 month planning is really fast. It's 4 times faster. It's not as fast as maybe it could be. I would say when I've looked at teams that started well with Scrum and started well with Safe, their problem isn't so much what they're doing. There are problems in both. But the big stagnation comes from when a pull system turns into a push system. Like with Safe, it starts out great. The managers let them, oh yeah, this is what you do 3 months, great. We're going to try this new thing, go for it. If you notice, all the Safe or most of the Safe uh, case studies were done after 6 months, and they're all successful. And why is that? Because if you just stop overloading teams, you're going to get a lot more done. And that's what happens. So the first time it's like, wow, that was wonderful. Look at all this extra stuff we got in 3 months. Safe's wonderful. And then they do it again. And usually it's not good for 6 months, because after 2 PIs, managers start wanting to get more. And it revolves to or devolves to a push system. Same with Scrum. Oh, I can do this, just add this a little bit into the sprint. So pull is important. You got to pull to avoid overloading capacity. We pull the most important thing. Don't pull things of less value. It distracts us. Now, what's interesting about pull is it solves a lot of problems that are not discussed in the Agile space, but are part and parcel of lean. So I wanted to talk about that. So I'm going to give you a little situation. I use an offshore company to do a little bit of my graphics. And this was the situation. I had a customer. They had one developer. So this is really simple, but you'll get the idea. You can convert this into a full team, multiple teams, multiple products, and multiple teams, and use pull. And I talk about that in my workshops. But this example is just simple to illustrate something. But this is a real example. So what I did, I needed PowerPoint slides converted or created, conceptually. So I gave them old slides, like I would sketch out what I wanted, and I had them to rebuild. Those of you who don't know, I sold all my stuff about 2.5 years ago to the PMI. So I've been spending the last 2.5 years rebuilding from scratch. Some of the things I had I didn't like because they just were sketches and stuff. I had to redo it. So I hired this company. And I said, I'm going to give you these things and you guys figure out how to do it, right? Because Agile, self-organizing teams or one person, no problem. But see here, then they have to understand how much I want to be done and accommodate. And it turned out it didn't work well at all. They couldn't read my mind. Can you believe that? Offshore company, I told them what I wanted. They didn't read my mind. It must be, it just doesn't go through the Ethernet or something, But anyway, it wasn't the disaster, but see, they would create their own PowerPoints. They'd had it scattered all over the place. And I was like, oh my God, this is so much extra work and it's driving me nuts. Now, I didn't get mad at them. I immediately knew where the source of the problem was. And by the way, you're looking at them. It was with me, because I told them what I wanted done without any way of doing it, and they just came up with their own ideas. So I thought about this. I didn't want to demand how they do the work itself. That would be wrong. But maybe I could set up an explicit workflow that they could follow, that I could follow, and we wouldn't need status reports. Don't need a daily status report. So here's what we did. So there are these other advantages. Explicit workflow. What if I told them how I wanted it done from my perspective? Now, I'm not saying it always has to come from the customer. In this case, it did. They could have had theirs. I could have understood it and said, okay. But we don't need meetings when you have status reports. So this is what we did. I just sketched it out. I actually wrote this up in text, but this is basically what it did. I was the product owner, I'm the customer. I said, look, I'm going to put something in a file. These represent 4 files we had. I'm going to put something in a file that's ready to be worked on. Okay. You can pull when you have you've got like, maybe there's nothing here. So you decide to start something new. They will pull the top item. So the order I put these in, I don't prioritize them. I just sequence them. The order I put these in, they pull the top item and they work on it. And then when they're done, they just put it in the items done. And then I look whenever I want to look. See, I'm doing this in a non-synchronized way. I'll look what's here and I'll say, oh, I like that. And I put it in the items. We had 4 PowerPoint files. I would move it into here. Now, if I didn't like it and I really need it, I'd put it back in this file and I'd mark it as urgent, and then they would start working on that. Or I might just mark it as expedited, like you don't have to stop what you're doing, but have this be the next thing. Or I might just decide I'll just put it back on the backlog. It was easy. I mean, I wrote up something, took me about a half hour to an hour. It's just basic Agile, right? And it's just basic Agile. It's nothing special. But what happens is I don't have to talk to them. I mean, we use Slack, when I want to give them correction. But notice I can just look at what's in the PowerPoint files to see where things are. We didn't have status reports. We just would look. She would usually give me at the end of the day, hey, we did this, we did that. So, but I didn't need her to do that, but it was just nice because then I didn't have to go look to see exactly. So she would just say, we did some things done. Now, by the way, this didn't solve all the problems. Why? Because they still can't read my mind. And when I had them start converting icons, which are really, I bought these big icon files from Shutterstock, I think it was, and I couldn't read them because they don't have an EPS reader. So I asked them, hey, cut these up into little things so I can see them. So now we had what's called a class of service. If it's a graphic, that's one thing. If it's an icon and I want an SVG, that's another thing. But it all goes through the same way. We just had a different file to put things in. Notice how beautiful this is. The pull mechanism not only gets it so they don't get overloaded, it makes it so we can see what's going on because we have a description about the pull. I just thought that was really cool. That's just a summary of what I just said. By the way, what I also did is I had my own little database here. Don't show it here, but I have my own little database, like stuff I'm considering. So these are when I wanted them to do it, and then I had stuff here. Okay, almost done. This is actually the summary. Where does our capacity go? We like to think this is what happens, but basically we usually have some problems. The quality, productive work's not good because we're trying to go fast. And then when we don't understand, we have quality issues we also have misunderstood requirements. So we have to spend time on that. And then the delays in workflow create waste. We spend time on that. And then we have multitasking. That just lowers our efficiency, but that takes off the productive work. So then we wonder why we're getting so little done. So what does management do? Well, I think they need a little more pressure. See, this is the big fallacy in the space. The big fallacy in the space is follow until you understand means you can't explain it to management. So when management doesn't go along, when management doesn't go along with you, don't blame them. That's your fault. Really. It's one of the things. So, but you get to be a victim. And when you get to be a victim, it's not in your mind, it's not your fault. You're being victimized. Or you get to be a martyr. See, martyrs and victims are really the same thing. The difference between a victim and a martyr is this. A victim says, oh my goodness, these people are so against me, I cannot get the job done. And a martyr says, oh my goodness, these people are so against me, but I'm tough and I'm going to get the job done anyway. But the common piece is you're not responsible. See, this is why you need to understand. This is why Foundations makes it so much easier to get jobs done, because you can talk to people about this. Okay. Lean tells us the trick isn't about going faster. It's about eliminating all that crap. Okay. So this is the summary. There's more to this, of course, but these are the foundations for any approach. And the reason I say think global, act local, because of the value stream. Remember, we're in a hierarchy, so you can't just do your own. So focus on value. These are the things. These are the key principles. Value, feedback, remove delays, small completions, avoid multitasking, a focus on finishing, and pull. This is not a lot. and you have experience with all of these. Okay. Just a little bit, if you're interested about me, everybody here is in the community practice, but if you're watching this tape and you're not, because this will be made public, join the community practice. I'm going to be starting an Amplio Value Coach in May. It's $9.95. If you're in the ACE program for a year subscription, it's only $195. And some of you, if you've only taken it once, you can retake it, no charge at all. I see a couple people here of that situation. I want to say a word about the Value Coach and the consultant educator's journey. It's got a lot of scope. It's a year. We do 6 one-hour meetings a week, more or less. Every 5 weeks, we take a break. But it's got 3 one-hour tracks of content and 3, well, this is one of the hours. Is ACOP, also part of the ACE program. And there are 2 one-hour tracks for Q&A or working sessions. But it's got 3 tracks. It's got a content track, which is like what you do. Like if you were to take Scrum at Scale, it'd be like that. We will cover what I call Blast, my version. Not my version of it. Mine that predated Scrum at Scale by 10 years. But there's content. So it's like business agility track, I call it. Then there's how to decide which of the options you have to do. I call that the consulting track, because the consultant educators program is about making you a better consultant with companies. And the third track is what I call the coaching track, because you really need to know what to do in your options, how to decide the options, that's consulting, and how to convey the ideas to coaching. I discovered this a couple of years ago when I did my first Amplio development workshop, and people were saying, yeah, but how do I tell people about this? And that's when I realized these 3 things need to always be integrated into workshops, but seldom are. So anyway, the Value Coach workshop is part of the ACE program. That's why I discount it so heavily if you're in that. But I'm just doing it in a 4 3.5-hour session starting in May to accelerate it. Okay, I'm done with this, and now I'm going to basically ask you to ask me questions, but I actually have a question for you as well. So you can either ask your own questions or you can respond to this question. My belief, and it's just a belief for me because you're the ones who would really know the answer, is that if you were just really worried about, say, something at the team level and you could focus on these things, I'm suggesting it doesn't take much to learn. My question is, do you have a sense that doing a team process focusing on these 7 things would just not be that hard, but would be a lot more effective than what's commonly being done? But now open to answers or questions. So I'm done with the presentation. You got to talk to me now. And now you can ask, how do you go deeper into something too? So that was just during the first 30 minutes. I didn't want that. But if you, oh, that sounds good, but how would I build an MVI or whatever?
Al, I have to drop shortly, but thank you. It's neat to, it's great to see it not boiled down or reduced. Those suggest that something has been lost, but essentialized. It's feedback for me to ponder. I have to drop shortly, but
Great, Andrew.
This is a happy feed for it's a great way to start my day. Thank you for
great.
this.
Thanks for that. And ask questions. You know, we have I should have mentioned that there's a user group on LinkedIn called the Amplio Consultant Educators Program, which is, I think, an easier way to ask questions. So feel free to contact me that way. If it's something confidential, then shoot me an email. That's al.shalloway at successengineering.works. Great. Thanks, Andrew. I'm going to look at the chats. Oh, interesting. No questions?
Well, since you asked for comments and questions, let me break the ice.
Please. Thank you, Thomas.
I think, as in many courses, let's say you are at a training course, you ask yourself, So what can I do different Monday morning, or the next workday when I come back from this course? Because when you present it and see it presented this way, it all makes a lot of sense. The next question then is, how can I affect change? And maybe to phrase it as a question, what do you recommend for people who are in a larger company and that want to institute some of these changes, like making smaller increments or focusing more on finishing than starting? And when they encounter organizational resistance, when the system is kind of stacked against implementing these things?
Okay, that's a great question. Now I have to give two different answers because it depends where you're doing this, okay? So I'll give the easy answer first, which is if you're doing this at the team. Okay, so this is in the ACOP. This is the ACOP page that I've been building, and this is not what's on Thinkific. You have to, I keep track of stuff there, and that's where I have a lot of the links. But what if you go to the success engineering and a learning journey in ACOP, you should be familiar with this. I've created an overview curriculum calendar. This is just a high level summary, but I have a detailed one for these different tracks. And the reason I'm pointing this out is if you're at the team, what I did here is I looked at what could you do to go from, say, ineffective Scrum or any ineffective team. What are the different steps? And I have something on the S's of what Amplio team is, the hows of Scrum, because if you understand the hows and how to go beyond them, and you understand, and some of these are just LinkedIn posts. So like this thing here was why are the different practices? So I literally list out why do we do a retrospective? So I have the what and why, and then here's how Scrum says to do it, so I can break you free of it. So the reason I point this out in answer to your question, I would suggest if you're at a team that's having problems, you can literally just take each one of these. These are small Kaizen steps. Okay, but now I think you were talking about a much bigger problem. So let's talk about that. And let's look at it this way. And to be candid, I haven't really, off the top of my mind, I'm not quite prepared for this. I did write up something once before on this. So just a second. I just want to pull this back up. Here we go. Let's look at this. Okay. So how would you move forward with this? Okay. So one thing you could do right away is do like a focus on finishing. Part of this could also be where I talked about starting. The MVI concept is something that's actually pretty typically easy to implement, regardless of how things are, because you say, okay, we got this big thing. Okay, well, what can we deliver next? Now, I'm not saying management will agree with you. Okay. In other words, let's say they've given you this 4-month project, and embedded in that 4-month project is something that can be done in a month. And you ask, well, what do you want soonest? And they'll say, no, we want it all. And you can't get them off that. So this happens a lot. So what you say is, yeah, okay, we know we're going to build it all, but we want to ask you a favor for us. We have discovered that if we find those core pieces that will provide the greatest value, even if we don't deliver them, except as a whole batch, but if we build it incrementally and we give feedback and we get feedback, we find we do better. So when you're looking at, this is part of the consulting and coaching that you want to look at what can they do that's not a problem for them. Okay, so they're saying, well, I'm going to get this 4-month thing, and they're not having to change what they've asked for, and they're not having to change their expectations. But you ask them for the favor of what would be the most important things to help you build it. Then after a month goes by and you've actually built something that's of value, you can say, by the way, we've built this. We could release it now if you want, but we said we're going to build it all in 4 months and give it to you. And very often they will say, oh, what do you mean? If I want to, I could get this now. And yeah, we could, but you wanted the whole thing. So that's another one you could use. I think MVIs are a good thing. So the focus on finishing is a big one. You could start with virtually any time. See, pull may or may not be something you can implement. Certainly not a large organization, because unless you have MVIs, and unless you have agreement on who the stakeholders are, you're not going to be able to do that. Oops. There we go. Let me just pull up the list. Getting clarity on stakeholders is sometimes something you can do and sometimes something you can't do. I've gone into any number of places where they say, no, we have to live, we're not doing product management improvements or that, so sometimes you can't do that. Getting quick feedback, I have never seen a company not able to do something to get you quicker feedback if they are not doing Agile at some level. If you're doing Scrum, one of the problems I find in the Scrum camp is, and I know you don't have to do it this way, but again, what you think and talk about is what you see. People often do not get feedback quicker. I think this is one of the things I had in the list. I'm looking for a graphic I didn't put in here because I was trying to go shortly. I'm going to show you something else in a second, just as I went by it. And maybe I don't have the slide in this deck. I thought I did. But let me just say what it is without the slide. I actually like to talk to customers as often as I can, not wait for the end of the 2 weeks. And I will do retros if I can to detect problems as quickly as I can, because when you detect a problem, early, you can fix it early and you get better results and less waste. Here was just one other thing I went by. I'm going to point. This is something you can learn in the ACE program in the coaching workshop, is this idea that when you have to convey ideas, this is something that'll won't give you the path you asked for, Thomas, but it'll give you a way to get, when you decide on something, how to get it to people. Years ago, I was having to explain a lot of things to people, and I felt like there's no way I'm not going to overwhelm them. And I viewed the curriculum I needed to do as a pile of pickup sticks. It's like, what do they already almost know? So look for things that they already almost know, that like a pickup stick, I can give them that. It's not dependent on anything. And then when I pull it off, they now have something else. Oh, look at this. Now I can talk to them about this. And then now I can talk to them about this. Oh, and now I can talk to them about this. So part of the answer to your question is, how can I go through little steps where I look to see how I can do one little thing after another. One other thing is, what can I make a change that'll kind of enhance other changes? Yeah, so hopefully that was enough. I see Susan's got her hand up, so I'm going to ask her to ask.
I just wanted to say that there are things you can do in whatever context you're working to provide other people with faster feedback. And then that can kind of start a cycle of
That's
people
great.
offering feedback faster. Depending on where I was and when it was, I might be a technical writer or a business analyst or a software tester. And if it is, to talk about the testing first, when developers got to where they could trust me not to try to make a big thing out of things, but simply to say, what about this? What about that? They would say, could you take a quick look at this? It's not official testing, but yes, I'll take a quick look at that. And I'll say, oh, well, this looks like it works, but this particular piece, I'm not quite sure what you're trying to do here, but it does this when I do that. And so it gets back to them faster.
Yeah, Susan, what I really like about what you said is it puts you in charge, but it also makes me think of, there's an exercise. I don't think I've covered it yet in the ACE program, because I see a variety of ACEs here. We call it the clean slate exercise or game. It's not something I made up, but it's something I learned from actually one of my own consultants when he was at a company where there was just, the culture was so toxic. He said he can't really get anything done because nobody's really listening to anybody else. It's just, they're all just upset. And he was a smart guy. So I gave him, I knew he could get the job done, but I knew he was in trouble. And he suggested, he asked me, he said there was this exercise he'd learned called the clean slate. And in there you have the team, people put up on the board how the system is working against them. Like, I'm a victim, you know, that's that idea. What's wrong? What's all that? But then you put up a side that says how I failed the system. So it's like, how's the system failing me? How have I failed the system? And what people got to see was, first of all, here's how the system's hurting me. That's useful to show to management. And they got to see, here's what you just said. Here's what I could do to help the system that I'm not doing. So the clean slate was an opening. The main reason we ran it, I ran it fairly often, was to get them to expose the problems the system's giving, and then to create the awareness that they had to help fix it, not just lay back and complain about it. But what you just said is another slight angle to this, which is, oh, what can I do to help? So maybe a modified clean slate would be a good idea. Like, here's what I wish other people would do, but here's what I could do today, would be another way of saying that.
Yeah, and one of the things about it was usually they were doing things in such a way that they would say, "Oh, you can't test it yet because we haven't finished." And my point was, well, if there's a little piece that's finished, let me test that so you can get an idea of how well it's working.
Yeah. See, the problem I see in the Agile space now is everybody's looking at frameworks. Am I doing a framework? Am I doing SAFe? Am I doing Scrum? Am I doing Kanban? These are all solutions. Now, Kanban's a little bit better because it at least has you look at the problem and it can be changed a bit more, but it's still a set of predetermined approaches. And people are now talking about hybrids. But that's like, well, okay, I'm a really good cook. I've got Southern fried chicken and you know, Brussels sprouts and baked potatoes and whatever. And I learned I want to go out and I learn how to make lasagna. And now I've got two choices. I have a hybrid. I mean, I'm not going to really have that much variety. But see, what I'm trying to teach you is, what does frying do? What does baking do? What is how you add these? It's not that hard. This is something that Ellie Goldratt talks about. At the core, there are really just a few things going on. And this is what when I started saying what I might have done. And I'll put a link out there for you to see this. But one of the things Goldratt talks about, oh, I don't have the quotes here. I should put these quotes out on the site as well. But one of the things he talks about is this. See, these three is a mind shift. Much of the Agile space is working on complexity, trying to figure things out, and it's taking the wrong path in my mind. We think it's all complex, so we come up with complex solutions, but there are a few things, that's what I've been trying to show you, that makes it work. And he calls this inherent simplicity. Okay, time for maybe one last short question. Okay, well, if you have questions, I'm sorry, was it easy?
Yeah, I was just thinking, you talked about start finishing, and then also talking about focusing on critical stakeholders. And then, so how would you reconcile, maybe you are trying to finish up on something, and then you have demand or interruptions from critical stakeholders that changes the perspective of your focus? How do you advise dealing with those two issues?
Yeah, well, part of this is education. Part of the problem we have in the existing space, this is where, how do you do that? Well, this is part of education. This is where you have to get them to understand, what's going on. Now, if you learn these basics, you can use them as well. Here, let me pull up. These are some slides from the ACE. In the ACE program, what I do is I put all the presentations. I'm just trying to get it out of here, put it up here. I put all these presentations. One cool thing about being in an ACE, you get access to all these slides I've shown you, plus the ones here. but there is a slide I'm looking for. It was one of the micro lessons. You need to educate managers. They're not against you really. They just look to be against you because they don't understand a lot of times. Here. This is, I could have sworn I had it in here, but maybe it's in the Amplio presentations. It shouldn't take me long to find this. This is again why I hate the follow until you understand, because if you have to follow until you understand, how are you going to explain it? And one of the things you have to explain is what is the cost of interruptions? Okay. And they're not trying to cause problems, they're inadvertently causing problems. Crap, I guess I don't know where it is. One last try, because the graphic was really nice. I might have had it in done. This was one of the slides they built for me, but I may have taken it out. That's okay. So here's, I'll just have to do it without the slide. So one of the things you can do is you talk to them about what is the cost of interruption. See, most managers think that if you just do this one little thing, it's not a big deal, that you just have to work a little harder. What they don't acknowledge is that it's pushing you over the edge with the work you're doing, and that's injecting delays, that's injecting multitasking, and that's creating a problem. This is one of those little micro lessons I made for the ACEs, and I can't find it. It should be in the ACE presentations. So what you do with talking to other people is, how can I explain what's going on? That's why these foundations are so important in my mind. Because if you don't know explicitly why it's causing a problem, then anybody else who's causing you the problem is, well, they're equally misinformed, but it's not their fault. Okay, so one last, I thought I looked at it, but maybe I missed it. But no, I'll have to find that. That's a nice set of slides. Okay, so I'm going to call it. We're 3 minutes after, though we start a little bit. So again, if you're interested at the team level, yeah, I'm going to have to add this thing you're talking about, both the BZ and Thomas, about what you can do from a stepwise way of oh, here they are. Here they are. The cost of interruptions is an example of it. You know, so see, this is your current state. You got a lot of plan work. Everybody knows there's some rework and overhead, and they say, oh, you got to do this. Their belief is they're just causing that extra work. What they don't see is that it's creating extra work. So they think they're just putting this on you. When you start showing stuff like this and talking and stuff, see, then you don't have to resist them. You don't say, oh, I'm not going to do that. You just say, this is what's going to happen. You want me to do it? If the business need it makes that this is okay, then that's fine. You're not arguing. If you have to argue with somebody, that means you haven't given them a good reason to why they're doing the wrong thing, or they're asking you to do the wrong thing. Argument is a symptom that you can't explain it in a way that they can understand it. Now, it may be they don't care. It may be they're not properly motivated. Yes. But let me tell you, 90% of the time, it's they don't understand. Most people out there are good. If they're working against you, it's because they don't understand what working with you would mean. Okay. So again, these are slides you get in the ACE program. Okay, thanks for being here. I think that there's a way to take this, and I'll probably do this in the ACE program. I might even have a half day. See, I actually think, having done it this way, I think that I could take and create a half day, how do you do Agile team, based on these 7 things, and just fill them in a little bit. Certainly, it takes less than what Scrum takes, because you have a guidance and could understand it. Here's my last question. This is my main question. Did you really understand, get a sense of what I'm talking about, even if you don't see how you could take it to a full system? I wouldn't expect you to see how to take it to a full system. But my question is, I don't think anything here is that hard to get initially, right? You can all relate to your past experience, is my hope. And if you can relate to your past experience, you can understand. That's another key thing to recognize.